Harbor Freight is a great place to buy cheap tools, but things at Harbor Freight are changing. Harbor Freight was first founded in 1977 and opened its first store in 1980. Over the next 30 years, it grew slowly until 2013 when it opened its 500th store. Since then, its growth has increased rapidly, and in April 2024, it opened its 1500th store. It has continued opening new stores each month and will soon cross 1600 stores. But things at Harbor Freight may be changing, and in this video, we'll talk about what that is. We'll also talk about what kinds of tools are the best to buy from Harbor Freight and which you should avoid. It's a list that I've compiled from my conversations with current and former Harbor Freight employees, as well as the thousands of comments that I've received from my previous videos. I've also had some conversations with Harbor Freight directly and have some insights into their tool strategy. So stick around and we'll get into all of it. Now, I love Harbor Freight and I go there all the time. But in the past, Harbor Freight tools were seen by some people as disposable junk.
Ooh, junk. Junk. It's upside down. Got a Hoovius?
But they really have upped their game in the past few years, and it really shows by how much they've grown. But there's also a big question out there as to how much money they actually make. You see, Harbor Freight is a private company, and that means that they're not required to publish any kind of financial information. We know that they make a ton of money because they've been expanding so rapidly. Another sign of how much money they make is that their founder and CEO, Eric Schmidt, has an estimated net worth of $16.5 billion. That's according to Forbes. And he owns a huge 117-foot yacht and an enormous mansion in Beverly Hills worth an estimated $300 million. In 2020, his estimated net worth was only $4.4 billion. That's a 254% increase in just 4 years. Now, while most of their financial activity is a mystery, they actually recently disclosed on their website that their revenues are $8 billion a year. That would easily land them on the Fortune 500 list. One of the keys to Harbor Freight's success has been their product lineup. As I mentioned, Harbor Freight has a reputation for sometimes shoddy tools, and to be fair, that is what they used to sell. It was originally known as Harbor Freight Salvage Company because it was a mail order business that sold liquidated and returned merchandise at deep discounts. They've always tried to be a low-cost leader. And when I first shopped at Harbor Freight, I was amazed at just how much cheaper their tools were than other name brand tools. And the thing is that some of their tools were junk, but some of them were also workhorses. It was kind of hit and miss, but in the past 8 years or so, they've really expanded their product offerings and they've created new, higher quality brands like Bauer and Hercules. The goal of these new tools is to compete with the likes of DeWalt and Milwaukee, and so far it seems to be working. I had a conversation with a guy from Harbor Freight's marketing team a while back, and we talked about their tool strategy. What he said is that the Harbor Freight of today isn't your daddy's Harbor Freight. Those are his exact words. He says that they have changed. They've changed a lot, and they'll continue changing. In fact, he said that they're launching 500 to 600 new SKUs or new products each year. That's a ton. And they recently unveiled a bunch of new tools at the SEMA show in Las Vegas this past November, including some new Hercules tools, a new Hallmaster trailer, and these cute mini toolboxes. And if any of you guys were paying attention around Christmas, these toolboxes sold like hotcakes. In fact, I couldn't even find one myself. So that is part of their tool strategy. They're developing new products and new tools like crazy, but it's deeper than that because they're not actually getting rid of their older, lower quality tools. You can still find a Warrior drill or a Central Machinery sander. They still want to keep those tools for the people who may not want to pay or can't afford to pay the higher price point for the higher quality, more expensive tools, or for the people who only need the tool for small jobs or where it's just good enough. That is all part of their good, better, best tool strategy to capture all levels of the market. But here's the truth about some of these tools. A lot of them are made in the same factories as other brand name tools. In fact, let's look at a really good example. Here is a Bauer belt and disc sander, and it looks remarkably similar to the Wen belt and disc sander and the Ryobi sander and all of these. They look the same because they essentially are the same. They're all made by a company called Yanjiao Triple Harvest Power Tools based in China. In fact, I actually got my hands on a promotional video for the company, and I found something really interesting. As they scan through and look at all their tools right here, it may be a bit hard to see, but that is our sander. So why does this matter? Well, the point is that many of the tools at Harbor Freight are very similar, if not the same, as the tools sold by other more expensive brands. Why would you buy the Ryobi sander for $199 when you can buy the Bauer version from Harbor Freight for $99? These Harbor Freight locking pliers are made in the same factory as the Milwaukee pliers. The Daytona jacks are made in the same factory as the Snap-on jacks. So which one are you going to buy? It's a great question, but before we get into more details on their tool strategy, I want to tell you guys about today's sponsor, Tecovas. Tecovas is a company that makes amazing boots, both work boots and Western boots, and these are the boots that I chose. The great thing about these boots is that they're comfortable right out of the box, and you can tell that they're very well made. The leather quality is fantastic. I also really love them because they have a bunch of useful features, things that you'd want in a work boot. They have a composite safety toe for protection. They're also waterproof. They're oil and slip resistant, and they offer protection from electrical hazards. These boots are handmade from premium leather, and I'm sure that these are going to last a really long time. So if you're in the market for a new pair of boots, check out Tecovas. You can click the link in my description or scan the QR code on screen to get your new favorite pair of boots today. And like I say, you can pick up some work boots like mine, or you can check out their selection of Western boots as well. Again, check out the link in my description or the QR code on screen. And thanks again to Tecovas for sponsoring this video. So Harbor Freight's tool strategy is to keep adding more and more tools and better quality tools. And that's one of the main ways that Harbor Freight has been changing and will continue to change into the future. But there are some challenges on the horizon. As I mentioned, a lot of Harbor Freight's power tools are made overseas, and in China in particular. The most egregious thing are their American flags. Yep, made in China. In fact, it's against the law for these flags to even be sold in Minnesota. A lot of people don't like Harbor Freight for this very reason. In fact, I've heard a lot of people call it China Freight. On a recent trip to Harbor Freight, I tried to see what percentage of their tools are actually made in China and what percentage are made elsewhere. And honestly, at first I had a really hard time finding tools that were not made in China. But with a little bit of effort, I was able to find a few things that were made in places like Vietnam or Pakistan or Taiwan. My unscientific estimate is that probably around 85% of their tools come from China. Now here's the thing. Now that Trump is in office, he's expected to levy significant tariffs on goods being imported into the US from all over the world and from China especially, and that's going to have an impact.
The word tariff, properly used, is a beautiful word. One of the most beautiful words I've ever heard. It's music to my ears.
Now, Harbor Freight is not the only company importing from Asia. A lot of companies outsourced to Asia and China in particular in the 70s, 80s, and especially in the 90s to find lower cost manufacturers, and that's been good for consumers, mainly because it's made the stuff that we buy cheaper. But we've also paid a price for that. The price has been American manufacturing. We don't have the base of manufacturing in this country that we used to. And not only is that a problem economically, but from a security standpoint as well. China is getting more and more aggressive all the time. And if we needed to defend ourselves, we would struggle to out-manufacture China like we did Japan and the Nazis during World War II. So what does that mean for Harbor Freight? Well, their prices will likely have to go up to account for the increased costs due to new tariffs. And that's going to have a huge impact and be a huge change for them. They'll have to find new manufacturing alternatives. Now, when I spoke with Harbor Freight's marketing guy, I asked him about this specifically, and what he said was that they're actively looking at other parts of the world so they can reduce their dependence on China. Places like Mexico and Canada, more US allies and fewer US adversaries. Something that a lot of economists are calling friendshoring. Now, it'd be great if there was more manufacturing going on in the US, but a lot of the kind of manufacturing that Harbor Freight needs simply is just not done in the US anymore. A lot of other tool companies have experienced the same problem, and I made a video a while back talking about what happened to Craftsman Tools when they tried to onshore some of their manufacturing. And I'll leave a link to that video below so you can check it out after this one. Spoiler alert, it did not go well. So on this one, we'll have to wait and see how it changes Harbor Freight. But the one change that I think is certain is that prices will increase again as a result of tariffs. All right, so beyond the tools themselves, another aspect of Harbor Freight's success is how nimble they are. Their stores are relatively small, and so they can open them up almost anywhere. In fact, their 1500th store was opened in a place called Kernersville, North Carolina, which has a population of less than 30,000 people. A few of their other recent store openings include Alma, Michigan, with a population of 9,000, Pulaski, Tennessee, with a population of 8,000, and Forest, Mississippi, with a population of about 5,000. They currently have about 1,585 stores, and so they're closing in on that 1,600 number. We'll probably hit it this summer. Most other retailers wouldn't bother opening in a town as small as 5,000 people, but Harbor Freight does. And they do it because it's profitable for them. They're able to keep their costs down, and they can open very quickly. It takes them on average about 77 days to open a new Harbor Freight store from the day that they announce it. That's lightning fast. Some stores are even opened within 60 days of the announcement. Their competitors just can't move that quickly. And a small population of 5,000 people is just simply not large enough to support a Lowe's or a Home Depot or other stores. And another interesting thing that I learned from Harbor Freight's marketing guy is that they never close stores. Once they're open, they stay open. He did mention that there was one exception to that, and if I recall correctly, it was like a fire or something that damaged a store, and so that's the only store they've ever closed, and they actually open up and down the street. So they open stores and they don't close them. Not a lot of retailers can say that. But that growth also can't continue indefinitely. At some point, they're gonna have to take a look at other ways to expand. And when I talked to their marketing guy, I asked him about their plans for expansion. He said that they'll continue to open stores in the US as they have been, but they may also look at other markets in the future. He wasn't willing to go into any detail on that, but one thing that Harbor Freight does not have is any locations in Hawaii or Alaska. And I asked him if that would change in the future. What he said is that Alaska and Hawaii are difficult for two reasons. The first is that each Harbor Freight location requires distribution centers to be located nearby them for support and to get them the products that they need to sell. It isn't as simple as just opening up a store in Honolulu. You'd also have to have the distribution infrastructure to support that store. It'd be very expensive to do and would really require multiple stores being opened all at once to make it worth it. The same thing with Alaska. The other reason why it would be a challenge is that unlike some retailers, Harbor Freight has universal pricing, which means that a drill in Los Angeles, California is going to cost the same as a drill in Ames, Iowa, even if the cost of living in both of those places is drastically different. That universal pricing may not be possible in a place like Hawaii or Alaska due to the added cost of transportation and logistics. One thing that may happen before an expansion to Alaska and Hawaii is an expansion into Canada. I asked specifically about this, and again, the marketing guy was not willing to go on the record as to their plans here, but I see it as entirely possible that Harbor Freight does expand into Canada. There is a similar company already operating in Canada called Princess Auto. And at $8 billion a year, I imagine that Harbor Freight could easily buy up all 55 stores and rebrand them as a way to facilitate their expansion into Canada. It'll be very interesting to watch to see if that happens. But to this point, all of Harbor Freight's growth has been organic. And so an acquisition like this would be very different from what they've done in the past. And so I don't know if that's really going to be a possibility or not. Also, expanding into Canada is not as simple as just opening up or buying up a few stores. I worked for a company once that expanded operations into Canada, and it was a bit of a challenge. Canada has different regulations, different tax laws, and different employment standards. You would need to hire Canadian lawyers and Canadian accountants that understand all of it. Their packaging would also have to change to fit Canadian laws. All of those things are expensive, and so it may not be worth it. But like I say, they can't expand in the US indefinitely, and so at some point, they will be looking for other markets if they want to continue growing. All right, so we've talked about Harbor Freight's business and how things may be changing in the future, as well as some of their challenges and opportunities. But let's talk now about the tools themselves. Now, as I mentioned before, Harbor Freight has a reputation. In fact, I'm sure that all of you can tell me a story about a Harbor Freight tool that broke the first time you used it, or a story of a cheap Harbor Freight tool that's still kicking after years of abuse. And it's true that in the past, a lot of Harbor Freight's tools left a lot to be desired. But as I mentioned, part of their tool strategy is constant improvement. And so if it's been a long time since you've been into Harbor Freight, I think that it deserves another visit, as a lot of their tools have really improved over the past few years. So on that note, let's talk about what are the tools at Harbor Freight that you should be buying and maybe which ones you should avoid. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning, I've talked with a lot of current and former Harbor Freight employees, and I've asked them their thoughts. I've asked them what tools they often saw returned and what tools they got complaints about. And I've also scoured the comments from my previous videos to pull out some nuggets of knowledge. And then there's my own experience, and I wanted to share a few of the things that I've learned with you. The first thing is that Harbor Freight's higher quality tools, the Bauer and Hercules brand, are worth the cost. At least that's what people are saying. They're definitely higher quality than the older tools. Now, I'm not sure how they hold up against a premium brand like Milwaukee, but there are a bunch of other channels who've done some testing on that. And from what I see, they actually do pretty well. Their line of premium hand tools is called Icon. And there's also a lot of people that feel that they're just as good as Snap-on tools at a fraction of the price. And honestly, one of the biggest benefits of buying their hand tools is their lifetime warranty. It's one of the best warranties in the tool business currently. Other tools like their Predator generators, their Daytona floor jacks, their Badland winches, they're all good buys, and I've seen a bunch of those actually being used in professional settings. The tools that you want to avoid are their lower quality tools, like their Warrior drills, for example, unless your project and your price point fit with a tool like that. There also seem to be a lot of complaints on their metal blade hand tools, things like their machetes or their chisels or their lathe tools. People have complained that they're just made from a lower quality steel and just don't do the job as well. A lot of people have also had issues with their precision tools, like their torque wrenches or their automotive test equipment. So those are things that you may want to avoid. Now that is just a quick list, but I have a much longer list that I'm going to share in a video that'll be coming out soon, as this video is getting to be a bit long here. And so be sure to subscribe to my channel and check back for when I post that video here soon. I also want to know your thoughts. What Harbor Freight tools have you used? What Harbor Freight tools have you loved or hated? What tools surprised you, either in a good way or a bad way? Leave me a comment and let me know your thoughts. I hope that you enjoyed this video, and if you did, be sure to hit that like button and subscribe to my channel. Also check out these other videos. I've got a link to the Craftsman tool video here, as well as some videos on tips and tricks for shopping at Harbor Freight. So be sure to take a look at those. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.